Welcome to the Board of Commissioners special called meeting December 13th, 2022. This time I'll ask Beth Davis to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jeff Sanford.
Here.
Commissioner Mark Caslen.
Here.
Mayor Tom Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Larry Maglinger.
Here.
Commissioner Bob Glenn.
Here. Thank you. Item 3, municipal order. Ms. Davis.
Municipal Order 50-2022, a municipal order affirming support and endorsement for the advancement of Owensboro, Kentucky as the quintessential bluegrass music capital of the world. Read for approval on one reading this 13th day of December, 2022.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve this. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. City Manager, you have any comments?
I do, Mayor. Just briefly, this municipal order is a little different, and it was requested by our friends at the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum. Executive Director Chris Joslin is here, and I think he will speak first for this item.
Mr. Joslin, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Chris Joslin, Executive Director at the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum at 311 West 2nd Street. And I do appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on activity related to the city's claim as the bluegrass music capital of the world, specifically as it relates to economic development activity. Again, I'm Chris Joslin, Executive Director at the Hall of Fame. With me today, I have Chris Love, who is the board chair at the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, and Terry Woodward, also board chair and CEO of Waxworks, and a longtime bluegrass music visionary, and Steve Johnson, who recently stepped into a newly created role at the Hall of Fame leading the Bluegrass Music Initiative, which I'll unpack in just a moment. But as many of us in this room know, we've been on this bluegrass journey for a long time, since the early 80s when our CVB launched a series of live music, bluegrass music events that eventually led to the formation of the International Bluegrass Music Association, now headquartered in Nashville. Also led to the establishment of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum. And then fast forward to 2018, and this work blossomed with a $15 million building, the Hall of Fame building, that you see today at 311 West 2nd Street, working in partnership with the city of Owensboro and the state of Kentucky, along with generous donors developed by the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame Museum. I relocated here to Owensboro in the fall of 2015 to lead the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame Museum, not simply because I love bluegrass music. I do love bluegrass music. However, I relocated here because the Hall of Fame I recognize as part of a larger economic strategy centered upon cultural tourism with a long-term vision to leverage the fact that no other city in the world, big or small, is home to a cultural center dedicated solely to bluegrass music, which is an original form of American music with roots not just in Kentucky, but right here in Western Kentucky. And the building at 311 West 2nd Street, the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, was never intended really to be the final destination on this journey, but rather the leaping off point for this broader initiative. We exist in part to drive cultural tourism and to create economic development activity through something unique that no other city lays claim to, bluegrass music. And soon after Mayor Tom Watson proclaimed Owensboro the bluegrass music capital of the world in November of 2021, a task force was established to determine the next steps with regard to Owensboro's claim. Next steps leading to real economic development activity around this claim. And it was determined that we needed someone based in Owensboro focused on building this city's brand, focused on recruiting new music-related businesses to Owensboro, focused on implementing strategies to increase tourism and group travel as well, and developing more destination events, and so much more. Someone once told me that a great idea without resources and without a leader or a champion is nothing more than a pipe dream. Thanks to two gentlemen in our business community, namely Mike Simpson and Matt Hayden, we have the resources for the Bluegrass Music Initiative. And just to be clear, when I say the Bluegrass Music Initiative, I'm referring simply to any and all activity focused on economic development, leveraging our city's claim as the bluegrass music capital of the world. And now with Steve Johnson, we have our leader, we have our champion. So building on the foundation created by this task force earlier in the year, Steve Johnson's leading this effort under the direction of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum, working on initiatives outside the four walls of the Hall of Fame, putting to work his experience in government affairs and public relations, leveraging his relationships locally and in Frankfort and in D.C. to advance the work of the Bluegrass Music Initiative. I think his commitment to this community, the passion he has for the mission of the Hall of Fame, the relationships he has with the right people, all translate into Steve Johnson as the perfect person to advance the Bluegrass Music Initiative here in Owensboro. And as we lean into this economic development work like never before going into 2023, this just felt like the right time to provide an update and to ask the city for your ongoing support and endorsement and assistance for the advancement of Owensboro as the bluegrass music capital of the world. Now, the Board of Trustees at the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame Museum recently approved Steve Johnson leading this effort on our behalf to advance the Bluegrass Music Initiative and also to affirm a resolution supporting this work. And that's why we're here today, asking you to do the same. And with that, I just want to turn it over to Steve Johnson for a few comments.
Steve Johnson, 2068 Sussex Place, Owensboro, Kentucky. My taxes are paid on time. Thanks to those individuals next to me, having the opportunity to work with them over the last several years, have been on the Bluegrass Hall of Fame Board of Directors for the last 6 years. So pleased to be on this journey with them and with you on creating global recognition of Owensboro as a bluegrass music capital of the world. I also acknowledge and thank those that have served on the Bluegrass Music Task Force, who's been provided outstanding wisdom and input as we've gone forward. So what does your being on this journey mean, and how do you play a role? You're a key stakeholder. You know that. And the success of this initiative has been, from the beginning, I want to applaud publicly the work that you all have done as the mayor and the Board of Commissioners. While certainly the mayor has been a champion and visionary who stepped out front, the support of the mayor, this board, and also your city staff has been nothing short of phenomenal. It's invigorating to be working together on this initiative that will be transformative to our community. There's no doubt about that. So in your packet, or the information in front of you, you'll see a resolution that affirms Owensboro as a bluegrass music capital of the world. I recall being on a joint call between the EDC and the Chamber where this first started to take legs, and Mike Simpson was on that call as well. But over the last several months, and since I first came on board to start doing this work, proclaiming Owensboro as the bluegrass music capital of the world went from a sense of urgency to make sure that cities like Asheville, North Carolina, and Raleigh, North Carolina, that understand the importance of bluegrass music, to make sure that we stayed out front of that. But it shifted to more of a responsibility. And when I say responsibility, what I mean is that we've got to get this right for the legacy of those in bluegrass music, that legacy of that started the torch, and then those that will carry that torch long after we're gone. So we owe it to those, if nothing else. So the resolution it's been expanded from the original proclamation that the mayor and Chris had signed back in, I want to say, December 12th of 2021. So it's been expanded. It's far more than a resolution. 2 years ago, that proclamation was made. Today, we're asking for your affirmation with the emphasis expanded into more of a purpose document. So as city leaders and staff, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read the overall resolution. You all have that. But I do want to highlight just a few points that are different than perhaps what was on the original proclamation. Whereas the International Bluegrass Music Association, a trade association to promote bluegrass music, was established and originally headquartered at Owensboro, Kentucky in 1985. And whereas in 1987, IBMA first established the World of Bluegrass in Owensboro, having moved to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2013, this combination trade show, concert, and awards presentation, combined with an outdoor bluegrass street festival, generated over $18 million in revenue for that city in a 4.5-day, 5-day span. Whereas the business community includes hoteliers, restaurateurs, night spots, manufacturers, and retailers who depend on a strong marketplace for bluegrass music events and expos, and many other businesses that benefit from high tourism rates. And the strength of the international bluegrass music industry and the bluegrass music visitor-based economy has a direct financial benefit for the city of Owensboro and Davis County, Ohio County, and Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, the Western Kentucky region, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, as well as the nation as a whole. Whereas based on the history, commitment, and demonstrated desire, Owensboro, Kentucky is the preeminent location to honor, celebrate, and grow the entire bluegrass music industry, its artists and musicians. And then the closing clause is your therefore clause, the City of Owensboro Board of Commissioners approves that. That's it. I appreciate the support that you all provided in the past, and certainly look forward and hopeful that you all approve this resolution as well as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any comments from the commission? Commissioner Sanford?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make one quick comment. I personally want to thank Terry Woodward. I remember talking to you years ago, and it took a long time to get the museum done. And you had a vision, and you kept working and working. And look where we're at today. You're responsible for a lot of things that have happened here. So I just personally want to thank you and your board members too. But Terry, this town would not be the same without you. So thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay. I guess we need to vote. All right, all in favor of this municipal order indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 4, snow route update. Jake Trogdon, street manager.
Thank you, Mayor.
Coming at you.
Jack Trogdon, Street Manager of Public Works, 1410 West 5th Street. And I'm here to just give a brief analysis of the snow removal we'll do every year. We start on or about October 1st with classroom training and hands-on training with a course we set up at Ben Halls Park. We train people from several divisions, including street, sanitation, grounds, buildings, garage, and transit. The street department goes out and makes dry runs over the snow routes that have been assigned to checking for manholes and other hazards in the roadway that cause damage to plows. We place new drivers with seasoned drivers to help them gain skill and knowledge during snow events. In the spring and fall, the garage goes over all snow equipment, inspecting, servicing, and doing any repairs that are needed. The garage keeps in stock all supplies needed, such as snow plow blades, wipers, and plow markers. We keep our stock of salt and calcium full throughout the winter months, replenishing when needed. We have 6 tandem axle dump trucks, 2 single axle dump trucks, 3 brine trucks, 3 backhoes with plows, and 1 loader. The street department has 6 snow routes covering 132 miles of priority 1s and 2s. The routes are set up with the following in mind: police and fire stations, medical facilities, ambulance service, public utilities, and transit routes, and large employers. Our response varies to the amount of snow and ice we get. For example, a light snow of 1 to 3 inches, we would salt priority 1 and 2. A medium snow being 3 to 5 inches, we would salt and plow all priority 1 and 2s. We keep about 12,000 gallons of salt brine stored on our lot. It takes about 8 hours and 3 trucks to salt brine all the snow routes. Salt brine can be applied up to 72 hours before a snow event. Road temps must be 15 degrees and above to apply salt brine. We normally do not apply salt brine when it's going to rain first, due to it being washed away from the rain. We keep about 2,500 tons of salt in storage on our lot at all time. We keep about 6,000 gallons of calcium chloride on our lot at all time. And each snow route takes about 4 hours to salt, using about 80 tons per round for all 6 routes. And that's all I got. If anybody any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Castleton?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was wondering, as far as your supplies, do you have plenty of supplies on hand this year? You know, I know with some of the supply chains, there's been problems. And what about your equipment? Is all of it in good condition, or is it getting pretty worn out? Kind of wondering about those.
No, the your first question, everything is fully stocked for the season. The garage keeps everything, plows, new blades for the plows in stock. We're fully loaded on salt, fully loaded on calcium, fully loaded on brine currently. And all the equipment, Public Works Director, Assistant Deputy Public Works Director, they keep us in good condition on all of our equipment for sure.
Mr. Glenn.
I'm gonna go by Glenn today.
What?
I'm gonna go by Glenn today, so. So the question I've got is, how does a snow route get designated in our neighborhood in Trinity Hills? Trinity Drive is a snow route, but then it kind of cuts off. I mean, that's the main drag in and out of the neighborhood. Everything else
Goes up to the
is a
cul-de-sac and back
secondary.
out.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It goes back to the cul-de-sac and back out.
Right, and so if a community or one of the neighborhood alliances said, we think our street should be a snow route, is there an application process, or is there a process?
We have annual meetings on snow routes, and that's hosted with the engineering department.
Okay.
And we could look it over any recommendation that y'all have to add or dismiss any part of the route.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor, appreciate it.
You're welcome as you go by, Commissioner Glenn.
Today, just to.
Someone that has driven a truck with a snowplow on it ain't as easy as it looks. And we appreciate the expertise your people put out on our streets, because we very seldom have any complaints about how well a job that you guys do. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, item 5, Fire Department call volume update. The Chief, James Howard. That's what you're gonna go by today, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chief James Howard, 512 West 9th Street. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you here today. City Manager asked me to give you guys an update on a issue that's kind of become more prominent and come to public notice in the past year, and I was more than happy to prepare and come here to do that. So we're going to talk about the fire department's call volume as an issue. This has been an emerging issue for some time. As you'll see on the slide here, it was identified as a weakness in several of the sessions we had in strategic planning. If you remember, earlier this year, I came before you and presented some of the information from the strategic plan for the fire department. And group after group within the fire department noted that the rising call volume, and especially the emphasis on EMS calls, that turned out not to be emergency runs once they got to the scene. Like it started causing issues, or it's been causing issues within our department for some time. As you can see to the left on that slide, that's a print article. It's an example of some of the media coverage that we got this past summer as information came to public notice about the issue. And by the time this came out, and I believe I spoke to 14 News, and it was in the TV news as well with a couple of different outlets. By that time, the city manager and I had already discussed this and discussed the imperative that we approach the problem seriously to find solutions that were workable to preserve public safety, but be able to have more efficient, effective response from Owensboro Fire Department's people and things. And lastly, on this slide, you see the reliance on partner agencies to implement solutions. We work in an ecosystem with other departments, and I can't snap my fingers and get things done. It's about trying to find solutions to work with other partner agencies to make sure, once again, that we don't create service gaps, that we're actually solving our problem instead of creating other problems. So it's not an easy problem to solve, even though it may seem like it is on the surface. So if we look at the trend line, once again, if the problem is that we're making more runs than we've ever made before, and it's causing internal issues with the fire department, then we have to define the problem and look at kind of some of the root causes for that. And overall, the trend lines, if you follow in this slide, it's a 15-year trend when you can see that overall call volume for the fire department increased significantly around 2010, and you see it kind of creep up in the past decade, and then you see from 20 to 21, of course, some of that perhaps being due to COVID, but it's part of an ongoing trend of increasing call volume. Rescue and EMS accounted for roughly 3/4 of overall responses last year, and that's become pretty common year to year over the last decade for the fire department, for 3/4 of the calls to be rescue and EMS related. Looking at the trend, backing up, not just looking at that single year trend, but the increase over the past 5 years before that was a 24% increase. If you do a 10-year view, it's a little over a 50% increase in total call volume, or for call volume for rescue and EMS incidents for the fire department. So if you look at this slide again, the graphic that's on here, that 15-year trend, and then you look at the next, on the next slide, the graphic on your left is going to be just the trend in EMS calls, not including all the fire and other calls that we make for hazardous materials and everything else. So if you look at that one and look at this slide, the rescue and EMS is driving the trend. You see there's a very close similarity in those two slides. So there's a sharp increase around 2010. This isn't a coincidence. In April of 2010, there was a consolidation of dispatch centers with city and county. And at that time, some of the call-taking procedures changed. And the city fire department basically aligned with the county fire department when it came to the kind of call types that they went to in the dispatching processes, where that had not been the case before that. So the city fire department found themselves going on more call types than they had gone on before, where the county pretty much kept up with what they had already been doing. And then you see a steady increase, and once again, I brought up the COVID impact in 2020. You can see a little bit of a bump there. If you want to contrast this side to the one on the right, that's everything in that 15-year time span outside of the rescue and EMS. And if you look at the trend lines, a lot of those on the bottom, which are lower frequency runs, you can see that they've come right along. They're pretty steady, even with changes in demographic. We have an aging community. We have expansion. We have different things going on in our community that would cause you to think that a lot of these things would be trending up over time, but that's not the case. You can see that false alarms are trending up. That's an ongoing issue that we work on with the fire marshal and keeping businesses and even homeowners accountable to make sure that their monitoring and alerting systems are maintained to make sure that when we get an alarm, we have confidence that that alarm's working and it's going to be able to help us find out if there is a problem and where that problem is so that we can go mitigate it. So false alarms, as I said, it's not a terribly high frequency type of run, but it is something that we combat and we have to. There's a significant increase in good intent calls, and on its face, you look at it, you say, what is a good intent call when it comes to an emergency service agency? Well, good intent becomes a catch-all for a lot of different things, but the primary type of call that is in good intent is dispatched and canceled en route. And the primary type of call that is dispatched and canceled en route are EMS runs. And what happens there is the call takers take the call in good faith, punch out the fire department. We have units going. And a lot of times what will happen is either an ambulance will get on scene and cancel the fire department, or they will get more information from their dispatch while the fire department's en route and cancel us. So even though that's the green line on the right-hand slide is the non-EMS runs, it actually is an impact on the department and actually coincides with the EMS calls as well, as you can see that curve. So what is this doing to the fire department? Why is it a problem, and why do we need to approach it and do something about it? Well, the organizational impact, it's something that I've felt personally. I've been on the fire department for a long time, and I've made a lot of these kind of runs, not quite as many in the last 3 years, but I'm no stranger to this, the fatigue of the personnel. Our personnel go out, it's not uncommon to go out multiple times a night, and for the majority of the calls when it comes to the EMS side to be calls where their skill set just simply isn't applicable based on the circumstances at that scene. The fatigue of the personnel, it doesn't just impact the personnel because they get up, they go, they may or may not do some good and then go back to the station. It has to do with how fatigued those personnel are from those multiple calls before that fire comes in at 4 o'clock in the morning, or the EMS call where someone's truly not breathing at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. Whenever the resources are being used, but not necessarily always used efficiently beforehand, then you only have what's left of that person to be there for that next run that comes out. Recruitment difficulty, it's not a secret. They're like within the emergency response community in this area. When we have Madisonville, Evansville, Henderson, Bowling Green, we have all these other departments. We're competing in a marketplace for talent with those other departments. It's not unusual for us to get to the end of a recruitment process and have like really good candidates end up going to Madisonville. We can hire people who, or we look to hire people who see Evansville as a better option for whatever reason. But they know what our call volume is. They know the types of calls that we go on. They're very finely tuned, these folks who are coming up and who want to be part of that emergency response community. They're factoring all of these things in. And it's not that the people out there wanting these jobs don't want to make runs. They want to make emergency runs. They want to make a difference. And the more efficient you are as a department in deploying your resources toward that end, the more likely you are to get those people who are the most motivated to want to go out there and do that. And it's not just recruitment. It also becomes a retention issue for some of the same reasons. Increased maintenance and fuel costs. Obviously, if you're rolling a $500,000 truck out more regularly, you're going to have to spend more money to run it up and down the road in diesel fuel and other costs. The more you run them, the more you're going to have to fix them. The trucks, the heavy equipment's come a long way. The reason that we're able to stay with the replacement plan that we've had for decades for these engines is because of the way that they're built as far as the suspension and everything now. Otherwise, you'd be running these trucks in the ground. So we have the city garage is fantastic, takes great care of our trucks and keeps them on the road. But we have seen increased maintenance over the past decade and more, and it's definitely obviously cost and fuel costs. Overall lack of efficiency and effectiveness. I look at all the resources that we have in the fire department, with our people being the first and most important. Then you branch out into the things that they need to put in their hands to do some good, and the units that are going to take them where they need to go to do that. And I always go back to NFPA 1710. It's a standard for deployment that dictates the critical tasking for units that are going to be deployed depending on the type of incident that they're going to come up against. And our minimum staffing in the city is 27 firefighters around the clock. If your minimum staffing or your critical staffing for just a standard structure fire, 2,000 square foot home, is 16 or 17 firefighters, you've depleted almost 2/3 of the crew on that. If those folks are worn out, not getting any rest, and constantly running on calls where they're not actually affecting a response that's a true emergency, then you're diminishing our response to that, and you're making the units less available for the true emergencies as they come up. So the area that we looked at primarily, once again, I've identified through the root cause analysis, we look at the call processing and how that's done, because that's the marked difference. Because you say, what's changed? Why didn't this come up in the early 90s? Why didn't this come up in 2004? Well, we didn't have this issue back then because we weren't even making the EMS calls back then. This is something that has emerged. The fire department in 2007 late 2006, took on the primarily CPR runs and started to build out from there. And then once again, you have the consolidation of dispatch in 2010, which accelerated that process. So whenever they get the call processing, a 911 call, if somebody makes a 911 call from this room right now, it's going to ring at the PSAP, which is the Public Safety Answering Point, which is the 911 center that everybody knows is in the police department here in Owensboro. So those calls come into them. It's typical for EMS calls to be transferred to a private ambulance dispatch. Municipalities that have their own ambulance service and have their dispatch center set up differently would do that a little differently. But here, and in most of the surrounding area, including Evansville, Henderson, even Bowling Green, those calls are coming into the PSAP and they're being switched out to another dispatch center that dispatches the ambulances. So the call selection for the fire department is based on those processing procedures. The fire department, or the municipality, through conversations with the operations, whether that's the city manager or in consultation with the public officials, we decide what is the fire department going to do and what is our profile going to be. That determination back in 2010 was made that we would take on a wider palette of runs, which actually put us to be similar to a lot of fire departments in this area. Well, the call selection, like I said, it's based on basically what we pick off the menu that we're going to go to. The immediate dispatch of fire department by the PSAP is generally based on very basic information if they're not performing an actual skill that's referred to as emergency medical dispatch. If they're not doing the triage on the calls to send them out, to get the calls out as quickly as possible. Then they're going to do that with the most basic information to be able to tell, to try to discern in a good faith effort if it's actually an emergency that the person who is called or the person that they're calling about is experiencing. So there's a delay of resource deployment with call triage implementing with emergency medical dispatch if that's not done at the PSAP. So the solutions we look at, once again, targeting these EMS, the EMS calls and the non-emergent runs, is the solution set would involve either adding staff to the fire department, so when you get close to making 10,000 runs a year, it's not so taxing on 99 people in your staff, or you add staff to the dispatch center so that EMD would be handled prior to the, like more efficiently prior to dispatch of the fire service. So I know that within the fire department, adding staff isn't something that that we're going to be able to do very soon. It's something I'd like to do sometime in the future, but that's not a solution immediately. So when we look, can we decrease the call types that get the OFD response? I don't want to decrease those call types by cutting out the actual types of calls we go to, because we've already identified the things that are immediate threats to a person's life or their quality of life through or their outcomes, health outcomes based on whatever's actually happening to their body, whether that's an allergic reaction, a stabbing, or anything in between those, right? So another part of the solution set is using emergency medical dispatch, an actual identified nationally recognized system that's subscribed to by dispatch centers that dispatch ambulances, using that system that exists that's used by AMR to determine OFD resource allocation before our units are sent on all of the runs. So these are some of the things we look at as different avenues to be able to attack this problem. So in consultation with Paul Nave over at Central Dispatch, we worked we've had meetings over the past year. There's been a lot of discussion even before that time on different avenues or different options that we might have involving dispatch, if any of their procedures, if there was any room for change where they could make some change, get past whatever training hurdles, technology hurdles, be able to implement some solutions that provide some relief to the fire department. And working with Mr. Nave, back in October, we determined that at the end of basically Halloween night at about 10 o'clock, so prior to November 1st, so that November would be our first full month of implementation, they agreed to change their procedures, as you can see on the screen, to provide for immediate OFD dispatch for a subset of calls that are seen as the most serious. These calls they don't need the EMS or the additional triage. They're obvious threats to life or the person's immediate health that we already know that we can send our resources and do some good whenever we get there. There's a long list of calls beyond the ones you see on there, and the ones you see on there are ones that are serious traumatic injuries or where a person's not breathing or has chest pains that clearly appear to be a cardiac event. Those are the most serious and obviously serious. Now, those are still getting transferred over to AMR to be dispatched for their ambulance, but we're not waiting to get more information. We already know in those cases we need to be on the road. All of the other calls in the matrix, once the thing is with this back in October, we did not cut out any of the call types that we've gone on previously. We only looked at changing the call taking procedures and how those calls are handled once they come in. So if it's not that subset up there, then all the other ones get transferred to AMR Dispatch in Evansville to be triaged. AMR Dispatch contacts Central Dispatch for any calls that meet OFD criteria to receive city fire dispatch. So you have the immediate dispatch on the ones on top, and then everything else gets triaged through the prescribed process that AMR is contracted to perform, and then they come back. And then local AMR is able to request or cancel OFD as necessary, and which has always, it's been the case as long as we've had AMR, and it was the case with Yellow Ambulance before them. So let's look at a few statistics from November of this year. So last month, I do apologize because the top stat there, I think that should be 52%. You'll see on this bar graph, you see the numbers from 19, 20, and 21, the numbers go up, which, I mean, in all respects, if you don't change much else in the age of COVID, you're going to see some increase in calls. So that was not surprising. just breathing difficulty alone, you would see some increase in your call volume. So we saw that go up. You see the drop off in 2022. Once again, that 31% is not accurate. We went from 827 total calls in November of 2021 to I believe 401 calls in 2022. So it's a drop off even beyond what we expected the drop to be based on the changes of the procedure that were outlined in the previous slide. So for all EMS calls and OFD, if you're curious, the previous slide where it showed that tier of the most obviously emergent calls, 21%, roughly about 1 out of 5, are ones that are dispatched by central dispatch to our units, generally in less than a minute, because it doesn't take long generally to understand the like which calls those are. So they send our folks. That's about 1 out of 5. The other ones are going over there to get triage and come back. The average turnout time, so that's the time that our firefighters, from the time they get dispatched until they're basically on the road, it's a turnout time of about 1 minute and 40 seconds. This is something that we're working on within the fire department to improve. The NFPA standard for turnout time for EMS calls is 60 seconds, so you see we have a lot of room for improvement. In the daytime, we get really close to that 60 seconds. At night, those times usually extend out, they can extend out over 2 minutes to get the folks on the truck oriented and ready to go safely to that scene. So that's, once again, that's an ongoing issue, trying to make sure that we're cutting into those turnout times so our folks are getting on the road to go help people. Because we know once we do hit the road, we can get there pretty quick and do what we need to do. Fuel use, this is just based on gallons. Gallons of fuel, just for the fire department itself. The use was down 15% for the department. So within a month, 15% is what is about $1,500 maybe, I believe. I think it went from like $7,500 down to about $6,000 if I'm not mistaken. So that's for 1 month. So we'd expect, could November have been an off month? I mean, it remains to be seen. We'd have to have more data. And you can't go just by dollars because of how fuel prices go up and down. So I'm just going by gallons in that assessment at this point. So what's the current assessment of the changes to the procedure and what we're seeing out of it at this point? The call volume has definitely decreased. It's decreased more than expected. I expected us to see about a 25% decrease in our overall run volume based on what I looked at as the historical statistics from AMR, comparing them to Owensboro Fire, what we'd gone on, what I expected us to go on with the call matrix that we have. So it's cut those runs in half rather than just by a fourth. I do expect the call volume to creep back up somewhere in between there and not to stay as low as it is now. We've definitely seen signs of improved morale at OFD. Some of that's anecdotal, of course. It seems like things were kind of quiet for the first couple weeks of November, and then I started getting the emails, the folks passing me, and just letting me know how much they appreciate the changes we made, and that they can feel it and they can see the difference. And it does make a difference. And the comment that I've heard more than once, and I've heard it, I believe, on every crew at one time or another, is they say, when we go out now, we're really doing something. Like, they know that whenever they get dispatched, the likelihood that it's going to be something where they could actually deploy their skills and make a meaningful difference in patient care and an outcome for that patient. They know that that's more likely to happen now than it was before. So it's definitely helped with morale. Feedback from the dispatch centers, it's a tale of two dispatch centers. We have Central Dispatch. They've implemented the system. They're processing those non-EMD calls very rapidly once again. Even the 90th percentile on those, I believe, is under a minute now. So we're getting those quickly. I do think that it is a training issue, and it's worked for them, because before they get all the calls, they handled them for the most part the same with both of the fire agencies that they dispatch, county fire and city fire. Now, when they get the call, if they're going to treat city fire different than county fire, then that's a consideration. And it's a determination that the dispatcher makes. I mean, they have information on the screen in front of them. They know which jurisdiction it is, but it's still different, even at this point after a little over a month. And we understand that sometimes mistakes are going to be made, but we always want to try to make sure those mistakes are made in a good faith effort to provide patient care if we can do that. So that's something that they're working with. AMR dispatch, on the other hand, they have more challenges because more of the onus for making this work is resting upon them and their dispatch center, because they're getting that those other 80% of the calls and having to vet those and determine where they fit in the matrix that we agreed upon. So it's still a work in progress. The communications between the two dispatch centers is critical to improvements going forward, and we do expect that to happen. And Owensboro Fire Department and Davis County Fire Department as well needs to have a seat at the table when those discussions are happening to make sure that we're improving, because once again, we didn't approach this problem to try to create a service gap. We approached this problem to try to improve our services to make them more efficient and effective. So OFD will, as you see on the slide, we'll work with both dispatch centers. We'll modify procedures. We'll do whatever we have to do. And when we get toned out, no questions asked, we roll. We get there. If there's a problem, whether your house is on fire or somebody's laying on the floor in the kitchen, our folks are going to take the skill set that they're trained to apply, and they're going to do what they can to make sure that situation's better when they leave. Does anybody have any comments or questions in regard to any of that?
Any comments from the commission? Yes, sir.
So where do lift calls come in? And by that, I'm defining it as AMR has a patient that they are having trouble excavating from the home to get them to the hospital or get them to medical care, and they're just too large for the two. I assume there's typically two people in an AMR unit. They need help. So where does that fit in this classification?
That is typical, and they can just ask for us over the radio, which they do. I think I heard them do that earlier today. And that's not just for lift assist. That's anything. Like if it's a call that doesn't meet our classification, whether it's someone who is in a tough spot even though they're not that heavy, or they happen to be heavy, which is more the case. It's because they typically do have two people in the ambulance, and you have a lot of issues, especially, I mean, as the weather comes in, when you have icy areas on the porches and having to deal with those cots. Once again, I mean, I've done this myself, and it's a problem even with the two people in the ambulance and four people on the fire truck. Sometimes it could be a real chore. But yeah, we're right there at the other end of the radio when they go across and ask for us, and they know that, and we'll be there for them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Chief, that's a lot of information trying to unpack, so if anybody has questions afterwards, I'm sure the chief will be available. We can email you. I had 2 or 3 in my mind, but they got kind of cluttered up with more information, so I'll text you or.
Yeah, as they come to you, absolutely share those. Want to make sure
like if you get turned away before you get there, that kind of is a run.
Yeah, our total run count does include dispatched and canceled en route.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was one of them, but I'll holler at you.
Okay, yeah, just whatever you need to know, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Y'all be safe.
Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda is item 6, is the city project list. City manager, Nate Pagan, please.
Thank you, Mayor. You have the project list for review in the packet as you typically do, and you have a hard copy in front of you as well. One item I'll point out in particular is the first item on the list, which is the batting cages at Fisher Park. You may remember several months ago we talked about how when we completed the improvements to Fisher Park, that project was under budget, which was great. There was interest in adding some additional batting cage capacity with those cost savings. We did bid the additional cages. Unfortunately, they came in quite a bit over budget, or what were the remaining funds. However, working with our internal staff, we've been able to find a way to move that project forward. So I appreciate the Parks Department and Public Works working to where the Public Works staff will perform a lot of the work, and we use the funds basically to purchase the material. So I appreciate the partnership and collaboration between departments to allow that project to proceed. Other than that, we're happy to answer any questions or comments you might have.
Welcome, by the way. You know, this construction cost for the transient boat dock and design, that's $9,500. Does that include the interest you're gonna have to pay on the bond and stuff, or is that just the
No, Mayor. The
construction
total,
cost?
that is just the principal borrowing amount. With interest, it's about $14 million. That's the amount for the dock.
14 million. Okay, that was my main question on the project list. Anybody else have anything? Commissioner Maglinger?
On the sports complex, what would that total be with the interest?
It's about $28 million for the sportsplex.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget about that hidden cost that's in these things. All right, anybody? Commissioner Sanford?
Yes. What would be the total interest on the total package?
The total borrowing right now is at 44.9 million, and the interest is 21.9.
At 4.75, is that about right? I think it is.
I think it is.
I believe it's 4.225.
Is it 4.25?
Was the number that Stan presented at our last meeting.
Yep, that's what he said.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the project list? Okay. Hearing no other questions, we'll move to item 7. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, we are adjourned.